Now moving to the back of our edge, you can see that I've got the side panel removed, and that's going to expose obviously the factory subwoofer and then also the factory Sony amplifier. And for this, to make our installation a little bit easier, we're going to be using the Axxess Amp bypass plugs, and which means that I need to gain access to the factory amplifier. I was able to run our RCAs and our remote wire back from our DSP, and then I have some 4-gauge power and ground here ready to connect up to my aftermarket amplifier. Now, just for the ease of installation of this particular system, we're going to be putting in a smaller micro amp in place of this factory amplifier, OEM factory amplifier. So in order to gain access, I need to remove the subwoofer. There are 3 screws. There's 10 millimeter down here, which I've already removed, and then 2 10 millimeters up front here. I can pop this up, slide this down, and out of the way. Now, I'm not going to disconnect this yet, just because I want to show you about our amp bypass harnesses and where they, what they operate or how they operate. So you see that we have 3 plugs plugged into our Sony amplifier. Now, this being a 2011, there's no doubt that it's, CAN bus communication between OE radio and aftermarket and factory amplifier. If you were dealing with a newer Ford vehicle, newer F-150, it's possible that it could have a Sony system, but it could be A to B communication. And the best way to tell if it's A to B communication is by a little blue, it's almost like a micro USB connector. It's in a blue housing and it plugs into the amplifier. That's a dead ringer, a dead indicator for how to distinguish between a standard Ford amplified system, operates fixed level audio, and is controlled via CAN, versus an A to B, which is a different type of communication and a different type of DSP product. So we can go ahead and unplug our factory connectors. And then, just checking up, we can plug in our amp bypass cables. Now, this cable is just going to be inputs from the factory radio to the factory amplifier. We don't need those anymore. And what I would like to take a moment to show you is just with a PT-9A polarity tester, we can show you how we have all of these heat shrunk labeled harnesses, front left speaker, rear left speaker. This particular one is left front tweeter. We have front center channel, right front tweeter. So it gives us a lot of flexibility back here. So let's say that we're going to do an actively amplified system, where we're going to independently amplify the tweeters and the mid-range from the front door. Well, we can do that with this amp bypass harness, and we can do it relatively easily. Now, if maybe there's space limitations of mounting a crossover inside your factory door, if you choose to change out to a component set or something like that, this is also a great location to make all of those connections and tap into it. The great thing with today's amplifiers, a lot of them, is they're getting small. And because they're small, they have a relatively small footprint, you can actually take and put some more components and hide them back behind OE panels. It's a great example of how the DSP can help free up some installation real estate in these vehicles. So I'm going to turn on my polarity tester here, and we're just going to give this a little, we're going to touch positive and negative. And we're going to be able to distinguish or confirm what our wires and whether or not they match both polarity as well as location. So I have already gone through all of these. They do match up, and they are, they do have the right polarity. Now, this blue plug, this is not, don't want to be confused with A to B. A to B is much smaller, and like I said, it's a USB, micro USB style connector. But we have sub 1 and sub 2 harnesses. So we can take these leads, connect up to it, and you can see, you can hear my sub. And I'm going to select the other ones. Again, same subwoofer. That tells me that this is a dual voice coil sub. So if you end up keeping this sub in your system, but you want to amplify it with an aftermarket amplifier, you want to make sure that you hook up both voice coils and that they are in phase with each other in correct polarity. Now, I'm prepping for the installation of the aftermarket amp. We're going to be reusing the factory amp bracket. So I'm going to remove the factory amp. And we can set that off to the side. Now, the great thing about having all of these, plug and play harnesses is we can put this back to stock with relative ease when or if customer ever would want to return back to stock. Maybe take the equipment over to another vehicle or something like that. So now the amplifier that we're going to be installing here is going to be a micro amplifier, so relatively small footprint. It is, we were talking about, having 4 channels of RCA run back, which are already completed. We got a power wire back here. So really it's just about getting the amp mounted and then making the connections to our aftermarket amp and then throwing this on here, and then we'll be ready to test the output of the DSP. So we take some Ballistic here and just going to apply it here just to deaden some vibrations that we might get. We got our Ballistic roller. Obviously covering up those bolt holes may present an issue for us in the future, but we can always cut those out. Okay. So I got a little knife here. And that one there. Now this Ballistic is it's the tri-layer Ballistic, so it's got closed cell foam up the top, on top of it, aluminum sheet in the middle, and obviously the butyl rubber. So this will have overall really good sound deadening, and it also helps, the aluminum foil helps conform and hold the shape once you get everything into place. Obviously our Ballistic roller, it's kind of a unique roller. It's high-grade plastic, and you can see that leaves a nice little pattern when you get this installed onto your metal bracket. So now we can go ahead and get the amplifier ready, get the amp mounted, and make our connections. So let's do that. Okay, I've got my amp bypass wires hooked up to the output side of our aftermarket amplifier. I'm about to make the connections for the power, ground, and remote. But you can see as I plug these in, just how clean of an installation this is going to be when I zip tie all of this up. So that's our next step. Get all that zip tied up, cleaned up. We're gonna make the connections for our power and ground, and then connect up our RCAs, which happen to be here, to the input side of our amplifier. And we'll be ready to listen to this thing. So I'm gonna take a few minutes, get this tied up, and we'll move on. Okay. Okay. So now we can take and we can put all of our factory equipment, whether we want to use it or not, back into the vehicle. Obviously, I have access to the input sensitivity and the crossover adjustments on the amplifier. The only thing we'll really be using off of that amplifier is the input sensitivity, or the what you call the gain, somebody would call the gain adjustments. And we'll get that third 10 millimeter installed down there. Finish locking all this back up with zip ties, and we're now ready to test and listen to the DSP, make sure everything fades correctly, yeah. Let's see how it sounds.